My Bigfoot sighting happened in 1979 up here in Hudson, Florida. And it was a day my dad, my uncle, and I, which we always went fishing up in the Sea Pines area. There's mines and stuff up there. You can drive and swim. And we used to go fishing up there all the time. It was before homes were built on the water, way back before all this was taken over. And it was a small, windy road. We'd go, way up in there. It was hard sometimes to turn around. And there was a lot of heavy woods kind of in the middle. But we just found a spot, and then we kind of walked our way down the little hill that it was to the water and fished. We did this many, many times. Never saw, heard, or smelled anything. And then one day it was getting dark, and we knew the road was really windy and very hard to get in and out of. So as it was just, the sun was going down, we were in an old station wagon. I was sitting in the passenger side. My dad was driving, and my Uncle G was sitting on the hood to guide him through potholes and this and that. And we're going, and all of a sudden we all kind of looked and said, "What is that smell?" As I tell everybody, we smelt it before we ever saw it. And we were smelling it, and it kept getting stronger. And all of a sudden, something came straight out of it was pretty thick woods, jumped out in front of the vehicle, probably about maybe, I have to say, about 15 feet in front of us. And my uncle was on the hood, and we all just froze, dead in our tracks. I was a kid. I was like, just looking like, what was it? I think it was like 12 years old. And my dad stood there with his hands on the steering wheel, and my uncle was on the hood, and nobody moved. And this thing, whatever it was, Yeti, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, whatever you want to call it, almost looked like a human. Had features probably close to 6 foot, very, very hairy, just dark hair, smelt so horrible. The hair was like matted towards the bottom. The face was like really wrinkly, like it had just been in the sun forever. And no, it wasn't a person. I can promise you. It had a hunchback, I guess you want to say almost like a gorilla type, how gorillas sit and they have that hunchback. Now, he was kind of thin, wasn't anything that was really thick like you see on other shows, TV shows of Bigfoot and that. This was nothing like that. And we didn't know what to do. And we just sat there and we were looking. And the hair from the head to foot was almost kind of like a gorilla, but the body was shaped like a human. The hands were huge. The feet were big, not gigantic size, but they were good size. And we just were looking. And I think we were all just shocked and stunned. Then my uncle took his right hand, and I knew because it was on my side, and he moved it just a tiny little bit. And as he did, whatever this was, he took off through the woods like there were no trees. There was vines, everything. My dad called it thicket that it had to go through. And it went through there like nothing. Now, you and I would try to do that. We'd have to cut branches, cut this. It knew what it was doing. Now, my dad had told me years ago when he was a hunter up in the Carolinas that he saw something out in the woods, nowhere near that close, way further. And he used to tell us stories when I was a kid about his Sasquatch. He called it Sasquatch sighting when he was hunting. He never got too close, but it was similar to it. He said, but it didn't smell like this. This thing smelled like, I want to say, almost like sewer, swampy. It was a really disgusting smell. And that's why I've only told a few people about my story, because I got made fun of. As a lot of people would say, oh, yeah, you saw a Yeti, whatever you want to call it. I know what we saw. My dad's sighting, I didn't believe him. And I told him when we got home that night, I said, I believe you. I was a kid. I was scared to death. When we went out this area, in all honesty, I never went back. I was scared. I slept under my blankets for the next few nights. I did not want to go near any woods. It was something I've never, ever in my life encountered, never seen, and never believed in myself. Like all of you, I was a disbeliever until you see it and smell it. You have no idea. And this thing must have lived, like I said, this was all area that wasn't built up. Now there's homes all out there and everything. So where it went to, where, it goes, who knows? But I do believe, I'm a firm believer in these now. I told a few kids when I went to school, I went back to school and told some of my friends, I was only in, I don't know, 7th grade, I think. And they laughed at me and said, oh, you saw a monkey, and they made fun of me and this and that. And I told a few teachers and they kind of said, oh, okay. One of the person had said, oh, what'd you guys drink? Well, I was 12 years old. I didn't drink anything and nobody else did. So it wasn't that anybody was drinking. We were fishing and had a great day at fishing until we saw this. And it's not that it was a great day. The thing is, there was not one of us or two of us. There was 3 of us. And we all know exactly what we saw. And I can tell you, I've never seen one before. My dad always told me. I did, like I said, tell kids in school, and being made fun of just kind of made me quiet over the years. I have told a few people, and some people said, oh, I've heard about them, and a lot of people do believe. I was a non-believer until this was my encounter. And you guys live over in Sea Pines, you still have this, it's an area called Old Dixie Highway that's out there. A lot of that is still all swamp. And I mean, that swampy smell is exactly what this thing, whatever I saw, whatever you want to call it, smelt like. And that's what I tell people. I didn't see a Yeti, I call it a Yeti. I didn't see a Yeti. I smelt it, and then we saw it. It was smelted coming before we ever saw it. Now, my dad's sighting, as I said, was in the Carolinas, and I had always kept that with us. And once in a while, my dad's passed away 20 years ago. My uncle's still here, and once in a while, we've told people it was kind of like at Christmas time, we saw a Yeti, and my uncle's like, I was standing right there by it, looking at it, and I know what I saw. And the minute you moved, that thing took off. Now, I have told other people about it, so I kind of quit saying anything because I didn't want to have disbelievers and people think I'm crazy and nuts, because that's what they do when you talk about it. Now, I believe so much. I got a imported Roddy that I brought over. Now, his name was Yako, and I actually named him Yeti instead of Yako. I'm like, it was a Y letter. It was a perfect name, and that carries on my sightings. I tell my kids and grandkids about my sighting. In all honesty, they kind of believe it too. They're not disbelievers. I believe there's other things out there that we don't know about. And with Yeti, I happened to have a customer that came, wanted to see my dogs, and that's who kind of got me, I guess, on the Yeti sightings and this and that. And he asked me how I named my dog Yeti. And I said, well, I guess, believe it or not, I said, I actually saw one when I was 12 years old with my dad and uncle. And he was like, no way. And I said, yeah. And he said, oh my God, can I touch you? So I was like, yeah. And his girlfriend's like, oh my God, he's a Yeti freak. And he's like, I can't believe you actually saw one. And I said, I promise you, to the day I go, I know exactly what I saw. This was not a human being. It was not a gorilla. It was not a monkey. It was in the shape of an old human that had the hair, the smell, and I mean, a stench that would just literally almost make you sick. And he did look old in the face. The face was very wrinkled up, but yet it was very dark, like been in the sun forever. When you lay in the sun in Florida, you get a lot of tan and it gets dark. And that's how this was, like wrinkly and dark. And he just couldn't believe that I actually saw a Yeti, and that's the reason why I named my dog. But if you don't believe until you see, that's going to make you a believer. And I can't tell you where it came from. I can't tell you if it's still there. But in that time, in 1979, that whole area, there was very few homes. So it was in an area that was very grown up, that had a lot of trees. It had water supply. It had animals. So none of us are aware where it went to or what happened. That was my first ever and only sighting.
My Bigfoot sightings started on the Appalachian Trail in 1999. It was approximately 8:30 at night. The sun was just beginning to go down. A friend and I had gone camping. We had set up and put all the wood in the fireplace, waiting for it to get dark. We noticed a figure 50 yards into the woods, standing up against a tree. We knew it was someone because this gentleman was scratching his face every few moments. He appeared to be as tall as either one of us, so we weren't threatened. And we proceeded to watch this gentleman for about 20 to 25 minutes. And then he stood up. We thought he was standing up. He went from a 5'6" frame sitting down to at least 7'5" and brown from head to toe, covered in a very thick, coarse fur. Immediately, I tied my bandana on a tree when he stood up, and he turned, never looking us again. And as soon as he moved, I took that 50-yard sprint right at his location, and this individual walked away from me like I was standing still in a snowdrift. And I went back to my friend and said, "Did you see that?" And they said, "Yes." And they had a really eerie feeling about staying there the rest of the night, but we did. That was but one event. Several years later, I was up in the same location, minding my own business, and I apparently disturbed someone by the call blasting of orangutan sounds that I was making. So they had to throw rocks at me. I received 2 rocks within 15 yards of me in just a few moments. So I decided that was just not the course of action to take. Recently, there was a few snapping of twigs and branches. I was on my way out of the trail, approximately 5:30 or so, when this big grayish black being steps behind a tree, trying to hide behind a tree that was obviously too small for him. And I looked at him, and he was immense, nearly 4.5 feet wide at the shoulder. And I halted, and he halted. We both were pretty much aware of one another's presence. He took several more steps, and I did too. But I thought discretion would be the better part of valor if I did not move up on his position. I am not aware of their capabilities, so I decided not to get torn in half that day. Another sighting leaves me camping this past October. I heard the whooping sounds as soon as it got dark. I decided to whoop back, and the sound moved toward me. So I ceased my whooping, and it moved away. At bedtime, I put the fire out, crawled in my tent, and within a half an hour, I could feel the footfalls in my chest of at least 2 Bigfoot in my campsite. He threw something at the tent to see whether or not I stirred. And it was a nice warm night, so I did not put the roof on my tent. Within minutes, this huge 6'8" silhouette was looking in my tent at me. I did not move. I played like I was asleep, flashlight in hand, not sure or not ready to blast him in the eyes with this light. And I thought I would be killed. So I did not. They scoured around the site for a couple of more minutes, and he came back in and looked at me again, still being able to fake like I was sleeping. He looked a little bit, and they went away. Needless to say, I didn't fall asleep for the rest of the night. I waited till it got late. I packed all my stuff in the tent and left the tent there. I have yet to go back after dark. My next encounter leads me to a time when I went up there with my ex-girlfriend. We were not going to stay over. We were merely going to eat, enjoy the evening, and leave. Well, I set her to maintain the campsite while I went up and got water from the pond for the fire to put it out once we left. And I heard this sound walking back that I couldn't exactly determine what it was, because it sounded like several different animals. The best interpretation I could give you is several of those kind of calls. And I followed it. So it went down the mountain, and I thought it was going away. So I get back to the campsite and don't even discuss this with my girl. And we're roasting the salmon, and it's somewhere about 9 o'clock at night, maybe 9:30 or so at the latest. And the sound returns. Walks the perimeter of our campsite in the dark for about 45 minutes. My interpretation is leave the salmon and get out of my house kind of deal. But she asks, what do we do? And I say, we do nothing. So we ate our food, packed it up. About 2 hours later, we left about 12:15 that night. And I took the rear with my flashlight, and I was watching the greenish yellow eye shine, watching us leave and saying, good riddance, these people got out of my house. But we were not the least bit welcome that night. Another episode leaves me making chimpanzee sounds, and I'm trying to get some sort of response. And I chatter on for about 5 or 6 minutes, and I get back a very loud now. That sent me back to my campsite. That evening, there was 2 of them, one on either side of my tent. They were whistling to each other. I thought I was being set up for a meal. So I do the only thing I can do is whistle back. That draws some more whistles from the one to my left, and he stops. The one to my right begins banging on a tree like a madman banging on a brick wall with a sledgehammer. I think that one was very angry at missing out on a meal. Another time, I was up and it was dark. It was late at night, 10:30, 11 o'clock, I would guess. And down the road is a barn where through hikers are allowed to stay with 2 or 3 huge dogs. And the dogs were barking that night, and I was returning their barks. And we were battering it back and forth, and from about 20 yards into the woods comes another woo, 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 which was clearly no dog. Well, the fire got really big, and I went in the tent after that one. He was close. That was probably the most intimidated I ever was. He was probably imitating me and the sounds of the barking dogs. That's probably all that was. But when you hear that, and you're not sure, it kind of puts the fear of God in you.